Hey, this is Matt Wenning at WenningStrength.com, and today we're going to talk about what Louis Simmons taught me, what you saw on the Westside versus the World DVD, was it true, and some other things that I picked up along the way. So let's talk about that. So the year was about 1999, and I'm just a punk kid. I had won a world championship meet. I was pretty strong, but I didn't know a whole lot of what was going on. I was from a small town in Indiana, as a lot of you guys know. But I was only about 2.5 to 3 hours away from Columbus, Ohio. Now, I didn't realize that Westside Barbell was in Columbus, Ohio, and I'd only ever seen articles from them in Powerlifting USA like much of us did back in the day. And the stuff that he was writing was just completely off the wall. He's talking about physics with lifting. He's talking about speed. He's talking about chains. You got to remember, bands weren't around at the time. He was talking about using this machine called a reverse hyperextension. There were a lot of these things that I just felt like I was behind the 8 ball, and so was the rest of the country. I mean, there was only a handful of guys here in Columbus that were actually training not only to get super strong, and we're doing that, but also training way smarter than almost the entire strength conditioning community, including professional strength coaches. That's why we saw a lot of those coming out of Westside. So the year's 1999. I go to the famous Arnold Classic, which is the big bodybuilding, strength training extravaganza here in downtown Columbus, and it's not nearly as big as what it is today. I'm walking by, and the big bench contest in front of the whole stage had just completed. And Louis and Dave Tate and George Halbert and Kenny Patterson, all these extra legends from Westside Barbell are all walking out because they don't want to stay around the Arnold. They just finished the bench press comp. And so they're all walking out, and my buddy Brad Sheward, he worked in surgery with my mom. We went down there, and he's like, look, that's Louis Simmons walking through the crowd. You need to go talk to him. And at first I was hesitant because I'm like, he's walking with like 10 or 15 other guys that are just monsters. And he finally just pushes me over there. Go talk to him. So I go talk to him, and you know how his voice is. I'm sure if you don't know him personally, you've seen him on the video. Hey, how's it going? And I start talking to him, and he's like, I'm like, hey, my name is Matt Wenning. I'm from Indiana. I'm a pretty good lifter. I'd like to come over and train with you guys and learn a little bit. And he's like, well, how strong are you? And at that time, I was benching 500 pounds raw. And he's like, oh, that's a pretty strong bench. You ought to come over sometime. So I go back home to Indiana, and I'm kind of not pondering not going, but trying to figure out a time. I'm in a kind of a transitional point in my life. I'm in the Pipe Fitters Union. I'm welding. I'm learning all the trades of that, but I'm starting to apply myself in school. So between high school and college, I took 1 year off because I didn't think I was good enough for college. And long story short, I was in this transition point where I realized that if I wanted to be a strength coach or something of what I do today, that I'm going to have to go to school. So I don't have a lot of money. I'm saving up for college, and I finally make the drive over to Columbus, Ohio to go train at Westside Barbell. Now keep in mind, Westside Barbell was in a small little tiny strip mall. It was maybe 600, 800 square feet, painted black windows. You couldn't find it. I mean, it was really hard to find it. You got to remember, back then you didn't have a phone to type in the address and take you where you wanted to go. We were printing shit off on MapQuest, and I'm driving into a 1 million person town from a small town of maybe 30, 40,000, and it's crazy to even go to Columbus, Ohio. It's a big city. So I finally find the place, but I leave like an hour and a half earlier than I'm supposed to. I get lost because I do not want to show up late. That's a good point. So the point is if you ever are doing an internship or you're working someplace and you're unfamiliar with people, the biggest thing you can show them is to show up early. That shows that you're really interested in what they have to do and what they have to offer you. So I come in and I sit in the parking lot for maybe a half an hour, and I start seeing these bigger guys pull up. I don't know any of them. Rob Fusner, Jerry Obradovich. I can't even remember some of the other guys that were there at the time. They're all walking in. These dudes are 300 plus pounds, or just ginormous monsters. I finally see Louis Simmons come out of his car and start to walk in, so now I feel it's safe to go in. So I walk in, and everybody's kind of looking at me, and half the guys are ignoring me. And this is interesting because Louis is kind of talking to me a little bit, but we're all training. And the big thing that I think that people don't realize is that when you were, back in the day, when you were at Westside Barbell, they expected you to learn by watching. So there wasn't a lot of coaching cues like you would figure, oh, Louis is a strength coach. And by no shape of the way that means is he not a strength coach. He is, but he coaches by seeing if you can be coached by watching. So I'm watching Chuck, and I'm watching these guys bench press and squat. I can't remember exactly which day it was. I think it was a bench press day. Long story short, I start seeing they're tucking their elbows or squeezing their hands tighter. They're doing these little things that I just wasn't doing. I thought it was as easy as grab the bar, take it down, take it up. And I got really far that way. But keep in mind, at 19 years old, my shoulders were already hurting. I already had elbow tendonitis. I was beat up because I wasn't training smart. So I started noticing that their technique is a lot different than mine. And so obviously I get my ass destroyed on the bench because a 500-pound bench at Westside at that time was nothing. George Halbert was doing 625 at like 220, 30 pounds body weight. A lot of the guys were 600-pound raw benchers at the time. So don't get it twisted that when Westside got famous, all of those guys, with or without lifting equipment, were insane and could probably win all of the weight classes in every weight class of guys that they had completely raw. This is no joke. Because you got to remember, back then the equipment really, nobody knew how to use it, and the material wasn't as advanced as it is today. And that's just history for you. We get to the bench, I do well, but I keep up with the group, but I'm not the best. But what he did get surprised by was we were doing tricep rollbacks, right? So it's where you take a dumbbell and you got both in each hand. We were laying on the ground doing tricep rollbacks. I work up to doing 80-pound dumbbells for a set of 12. I beat everybody in my group. Now that was crazy because all of a sudden I was the king shit. And I remember Louis sitting there watching, and he was so mad at his guys that some teenage kid at 19 could come in and beat them on an exercise. And all of a sudden the atmosphere changed. It was almost like, oh, this kid's here to work, this kid's serious. Because you got to remember, back at that time, every day in the lifting in the gym at Westside was competition. So Louis knew I could compete, and Louis knew that I could push myself, and Louis knew that I respected the guys that I trained with, but I wasn't willing to be beaten by them. And so after that, there was an open-ended invitation. A lot of people don't know this, but my sophomore, junior, and senior year, Louis Simmons actually sponsored my powerlifting team. And in 2003, we won best team in the country with 9 lifters. Now keep in mind, we're going against schools that have powerlifting scholarships, right? And that they might have only had scholarships for books or that maybe a job or something, but they were offered something to be on the powerlifting team. You had these huge 20, 30, 40-person teams in Texas. You had LA Tech, which was one of the best powerlifting teams in the world in the college age level, and we beat them and had best men's team with 9 guys. Think about that for a minute. So I had broken all the American records at 275. My friend Stephen Kouimanis had won at 242, and my buddy Tori Stott, which was one of the most freakishly gifted lifters you'd ever seen, won the super heavyweights, got the gold at the USAPL super heavyweights juniors with 8 weeks of training. We basically went and qualified him with just opening numbers, and then he went to the Collegiate Nationals and won. The dude's hands were like this big. He had fingers that looked like Vienna sausages. He was just a freaking monster. He bench pressed like, I want to say 530, 540 with like 9 weeks of powerlifting training. He deadlifted in the high 700s, and he squatted like right around 700 with 9 weeks of training. The dude was a fucking psycho. But obviously because it came easy to him, he didn't stay. So without me rambling on too much about that, Louis Simmons felt so good about us that he actually showed up to USA powerlifting meets, which were drug tested, which he despised, and he would sponsor our teams. It was amazing. He donated reverse hypers to us down in the weight room. I think he even gave us some other pieces of equipment. I can't remember. It's been a long time ago. But the point was, we created this really good friendship.